Seriously? Okay. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم يا صاحبي السجن أأرباب متفرقون خير أم الله الواحد القهار ما تعبدون من دونه إلا أسماء سميتموها أنتم وآباؤكم ما أنزل الله بها من سلطان إن الحكم إلا لله أمر ألا تعبدوا إلا إياه ذلك الدين القيم ولكن أكثر الناس لا يعلمون رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي فالحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. Once again everybody, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. So today inshallah I'm going to try to cover ayahs number 39 and 40 of Surah Yusuf, and that is the part of the story where now Yusuf alayhi salam has started to respond to the two inmates that came and asked him about their dream. In ayahs number 37 and 38 he already started talking to them, telling them what he left behind in Egyptian society and the legacy that he's followed of his fathers. A subtle point there that I didn't mention last time is that the truth that we believe in, it stands on its own evidences. And then on top of that, what makes it even stronger is its historical reinforcement, meaning the fathers that he mentions, the prophets that he's mentioned, each one of them makes the argument for this faith even stronger. So learning more about them makes your faith even stronger and stronger and stronger. So it's also interesting that before he talks to them about who Allah is or what Islam is or any of that stuff, he's first talking to them about that historical legacy. You need to know who these people are because I'm not telling you something new. This is something that's original. That it's not original, it's something originally given since the beginning of humanity, and actually the great patriarch of it, the great role model of it is our father Ibrahim alayhi salam. So this is a person you need to get to know. When they think of famous people, they think of kings or authorities, and now he's introducing them to this legacy of prophets. Actually, as a student of the Quran, I would also argue that the Quran's way of introducing Islam to the world is actually not by introducing them to Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. My understanding of it up until now, and it only gets reinforced the more I study Quran, is Islam's way of introducing itself to Christians, Jews, atheists, anybody, especially people with background in religion, is actually to introduce them to the early prophets and to show them that actually this isn't a new religion, it's actually a continuation of something given from the beginning of the story of humanity. And that's kind of what he's doing by referencing someone that he knows so well, his own family, to these prisoners. But then he starts getting a little more direct. So, if you notice the beginning of the conversation, he said, I left the religion of a people, qawmin, some people, and there was nakira, like some nation, one of the most famous nations in the land, and everybody knows what nation that is, the Egyptians, but he calls them some nation, as if they are insignificant. And they're the ones that take pride in their hierarchy. As a matter of fact, they used to believe that their ancestors were gods, right? That eventually they developed that kind of religion. And look, so when he mentions them, he says some nation that don't believe in Allah, as if they're not even worthy of name or mention. And when he talks about his own legacy, the people who believe in Allah, he names them Ibrahim, Ismail, Ishaq, the religion of these people. So he didn't just say, I don't follow that some nation that doesn't believe, but I follow some other nation that does believe. He didn't do that. You see that? So he actually went from not worthy of mention to the most worthy of mention, which is in direct contrast with the social reality of the time. The people that nobody knows are the people he's mentioning, and the people that everybody knows he's calling some nation. قَوْمٍ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ بِاللَّهِ وَهُمْ بِالْآخِرَةِ هُمْ كَافِرُونَ. Now he gets to this really hard-hitting direct da'wah. And if first I want to give you, this is not my norm. Usually what I do is I go phrase by phrase and try to explain every piece of the ayat to you, and then we try to put it all together. But here I feel in especially ayahs 39 and 40, you have to first understand the bird's eye view. And so I'm going to try to explain that first so the logic of these ayat becomes easier to understand. Again, if you study the way that prophets preached to their people, like if the prophets had a chance to preach to their nations, messengers had a chance to preach to their nations, The starting point is targheeb. What that means is positive reinforcement. Be grateful to Allah. Look at what Allah has done for you. Look at ponder over creation. Do you think you were created without purpose? Prophets don't start with hell. They don't start with Judgment Day. They start with the sense of gratitude. And you can see where he started, he was already talking about food that's being provided. He's talking about the honor, the legacy he has of his parents. He's grateful, which is already sounding odd for someone who's in prison. Why is he being grateful, right? So he's actually, by his speech, demonstrating something that he wants them to have also, a sense of gratitude. Now, once you have this idea of gratitude, that shouldn't human beings be grateful for everything they have, then you kind of narrow it down to this conclusion of one single God. And he's actually named Allah here, Allah nushrika billahi min shay' dhalika min fadlillahi alayna. This is the ayah we read yesterday. That it's been our legacy, myself and my fathers, that we will not commit shirk with Allah in any way, shape or form. And that is a favor, that's from among the favors of Allah that He's done on us. And He's done this favor to all people, that we get to be with Allah. وَلَكِنَّ أَكْثَرَ النَّاسِ لَا يَشْكُرُونَ. But most people aren't grateful. Now most people aren't grateful, meaning people that are grateful will never do shirk. And being ungrateful is actually a form of shirk. Why is being ungrateful, shukr, not having shukr, a form of shirk? You can notice the spelling is also similar between these two words, yeah? Because they contrast each other. So why is it that if you're not grateful, how could that be a kind of shirk or associating with Allah? Because if you're not grateful to Allah, you're giving credit to someone or something else. Maybe yourself. Maybe to some creation. Right? At the end of the day, if you're not grateful to Allah, then either you feel like you deserved it, you're entitled to it, whatever it is, whether it's your physical strength, your intellect, your accomplishments, your wealth, the wealth you've amassed, the businesses you've been able to make successful, you want to give credit to yourself for it. The degrees you were able to get, you want to give yourself credit for it, right? Or if somebody's done something for you, you want to give them credit for it entirely, even though they may deserve some credit. But at the end of it all, even those people, you should be grateful Allah brought them into your life. Right? So for example, I'm really grateful for my teacher who taught me, started teaching me Quran and Arabic. But I'm grateful to Allah Azza wa Jal for bringing me into contact with Him, for making Him part of my rizq. I'm really grateful for the friend who taught me how to pray. But I'm also incredibly grateful to Allah for allowing me to have a friend like that, because I could have had much worse friends. Right? So shukr and shirk are related to each other, because at the end of the day, if we don't acknowledge that everything coming our way is sourced in Allah, then that will become shirk. Then the gratitude will be misplaced in some place or the other. But now, it seems, and again coming back to the way that prophets preach, they make the arguments to people, but then they notice many nations that Allah talks about in the Quran, they worshipped many gods. Yeah, so they worshipped idols, or they worshipped, false gods, etc. Or they worshipped angels. We have all kinds of nations that Allah talks about that worshipped false gods. Yeah, like in the case of Nuh alayhi salam, they even had names of each idol. Waddan, wala suwa'an, wa yaghutha, wa ya'uqa, wa nasra. They're named out. Yeah, so they had holy names to them and said, "Don't you dare abandon these gods," and they named them, right? Now, then the conversation shifts from not being grateful to one true God, but then criticizing, how can you believe in multiple gods? There can only be one. You understand? So it's a more confrontational argument, because you're actually questioning somebody else's religious beliefs. They believe in multiple gods, and you're saying actually there can only be one God. What are you saying? I'm wrong? You're saying my parents were wrong? You're saying our entire culture is wrong? You're saying our entire society is wrong? It's offensive. Because calling out somebody's religion, as nice as the prophets are, you have to accept calling to Tawheed, calling to the belief in one Allah and one Allah alone, Him alone, is actually offensive to someone who believes in multiple gods, who holds their mythology to be sacred, who holds those books that carry those mythologies in shrines. And you're trashing all of it. Or they have these temples on the tops of mountains, so people have to get really exhausted by the time they get up there, so they figure we should stay here for a while and meditate, right? So when those kinds of temples in such high holy places, now you're saying this idol is worth nothing, it can't do anything. If a fly comes and sits on its nose, it can't remove it. You know, Allah gives this example in the Quran. وَإِن يَسْلُبْهُمُ الذُّبَابُ شَيْئًا لَا يَسْتَنْقِذُوهُ مِنْهُ. If you know, if these idols you worship other than Allah, or those who you call on other than Allah, couldn't create a single fly, even if they all got together. And if a fly did come and take something away from them, they wouldn't be able to recover it. لَا يَسْتَنْقِذُوهُ مِنْهُ. They couldn't even try to get it back from it. Right? Now that's really offensive. I want you to understand why that's offensive. You've got this temple, you've got people coming, and they're bowing to this idol or whatever it is, and they don't just bow. To get their wishes answered, they bring some offerings. Right? So they put flowers in front of it, sometimes they put milk or honey or, I don't know, a Kit Kat or Snickers, whatever. They put some, goodies in front of the idol as, offerings to get their wish answered. But if you leave food open like that, what's going to come? Flies are going to come. Now, if other worshippers or a tourist comes and tries to, hey, a Kit Kat, and he tries to get it, they're going to get beat up, because that's sacrilege, right? That's disrespecting the temple. But if a fly comes and sits on the giant statue's nose, looks straight at the statue and says, hey, I like a little bit of Kit Kat, I'm going to take your Kit Kat, you all right with that? And then it goes and sits on the food for a little bit and flies off. Can the god do anything? No. And those worshippers that climb the mountain to sit in front of this idol see a small fly destroy the foundations of their religion right in front of them, and all it can do is this. It's a remarkable example. Are you not looking at the flies and what they're doing? Do you not see that? And this almighty, all-powerful creature that you supposedly believe in, this God that you believe in, look at how it's being dismantled by a single fly. And even if you believe that that fly has done some blasphemous thing and it must be punished, go ahead and catch it. And once you catch it, get back what it stole, so you can return it to your mighty God. Allah says they couldn't even try to get it. And even if they did, how are they going to get back what it took? Interestingly, when flies take food, flies release saliva, and their saliva is acidic, and they form a net around the food that they eat, and the saliva immediately reacts with the food that they catch, and that chemical reaction immediately alters the food. So if there was some advanced technology at one of these temples where they could catch these blasphemous flies and put them under a petri dish and find these little tiny little needles to get the food back and get that Kit Kat, it's gone. It's gone. What I'm saying is, at one point, the prophets, just like the Quran, actually starts becoming offensive against those who make shirk sacred. Calls it out. It calls it out. Now, this sounds really politically incorrect. It sounds like you're insulting other people's religion. It's not. It's not. You can believe whatever you believe, but if I have the opportunity to tell you why that is wrong, I will say. I will say the truth is the truth, and the truth is offensive. There's a reason right after وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ comes وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ, because somebody's going to test your sabr once you call them out on the haqq, on the truth. So but that's a later stage. When they say, no, we're committed to our gods, we're not going to let go of our gods, then the prophets at that stage start calling out the false worship of false gods. That's when that happens, and that's a contentious stage. And when they do that, when prophets do that, then the next thing that happens is the prophets make a case for why you should believe in one God and why you shouldn't believe in those gods, and then they make a case for their gods, and there's a debate. And then after that debate, another stage comes where Allah, the prophets of Allah don't just say you have to believe in Allah, you better worship Allah because every argument you've come up with is myth. And you have not been able to substantiate any claims behind any of your religious beliefs. And the Quran will even openly say, Hatu burhanakum. Bring your evidences. Bring what you have. Why don't you just bring it to the table and convince, if you think I'm wrong. So the prophets are actually now asking for those people that they came to prove their religion to the prophets. Now this is kind of a very confrontational, it started with da'wah and I care for you and I'm concerned, but now it's becoming more and more confrontational, yes? And at that point, the evidences that they bring forward are, how dare you question this when I learned this from my own father, and my father learned it from his father, and they learned it from his father, and our entire noble legacy is to uphold the sacredness of this temple, and you come and you think that you're going to get rid of that entire legacy. Basically, people said we worship what? Our forefathers worshipped. That became their ultimate evidence. You're not going to change things. This is how we do things. This is our civilizational identity. This is who we are as a people. This is our culture. You're insulting our culture, our tradition. And the way the Quran says that is, we worship what our fathers worshipped. بَلْ نَتَّبِعُ مَا أَلْفَيْنَا عَلَيْهِ آبَاءَنَا. No, we're going to follow what we found our fathers worshipping. And multiple places in the Quran you find this argument. Right? So now that's the next step in this back and forth that is getting more and more aggressive. And then the Quran calls out their fathers and says, أَوَلَوْ كَانَ آبَاؤُهُمْ لَا يَعْقِلُونَ شَيْئًا. Isn't it the case that their fathers didn't understand anything either? You understand nothing and you think, no, our fathers understood. And Allah comes out from the Prophet's mouth. Allah is giving the Prophet ﷺ words saying, your fathers knew nothing either. They understood nothing either. Now that's super offensive, isn't it? That's getting even more offensive. Not only are you wrong, your sacred ancestors are wrong. Your religion is wrong. Your noble fathers of yours understood nothing. Wow, now it's just gotten way escalated. And so after that, مَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ بِهَا مِن سُلْطَانٍ. At that point, there's an imposition on you. Like now the prophets start getting threatened. Right? And they're being threatened with force. If you don't stop, we're going to stone you. Or we're going to get you killed. Or we're going to, those threats started happening. And that's the point where the prophets would declare, you do what you're going to do. فَإِن كَانَ لَكُمْ كَيْدٌ فَكِيدُونَ. If you've got a scheme to make, go ahead and make it against me. Bring it. The Quran literally says the prophets at one point came out and said, just bring it. That's what the point got. Why? Because they are claiming authority and power belongs only and only with Allah. You won't be able to do anything to me. Allah has charged me with this mission and my protection will come from Allah. So you can do whatever you like. So a single Musa can stand in front of the mightiest empire on earth and say, go ahead. إِنِّي عُذْتُ بِرَبِّي وَرَبِّكُمْ مِنْ كُلِّ مُتَكَبِّرٍ لَا يُؤْمِنُ بِيَوْمِ الْحِسَابِ. I am seeking my protection, my refuge from my master and who's also your master, from any arrogant one that doesn't believe in the day of standing or of accountability. He stands in front of the entire empire. Go ahead. And Allah sends 9 signs that debilitate the mighty Pharaoh's empire, but they can't kill one single man. They just can't do it. They're made helpless. So this is Allah's might and power demonstrated to the people. Then, after all of that, it becomes clear that this is the right religion. Because now you've seen Allah's power demonstrated, right? And unfortunately, by the time that the power of Allah is demonstrated, most of the people in that nation, they don't believe. These are the steps, right? These are the steps that, the story of da'wah is like that with the prophets. The incredible thing about this conversation, ayahs 39 and 40, is all those steps are happening in these 2 ayat. All of them. Those steps in other prophet stories happen in the course of years, yes? Decades. Multiple conversations, multiple back and forths. But with Yusuf alayhi salam, the entire scheme of da'wah and every step of da'wah is happening in just these 2 ayat. Actually it started already, but in these 2 ayat, it gets into high gear. And it's almost like it's different from the previous ayat. If you notice in the previous ayat, he said, I have left a nation, some nation, that don't believe in Allah. Was he criticizing those 2 guys or some nation? Some nation. He didn't say, I don't believe in what you believe. Like the Quran says eventually to the Prophet ﷺ to declare, La a'budu ma ta'budun, I don't worship what you worship. Right? That's not what he said. He said, I left their religion. So he's not calling them out directly, is he? He's being subtle with them. And they're like, their religion's our religion. They could think of that for themselves. But he's not going to go after them directly like that. And then he says, instead of talking about their legacy, he starts talking about his own. My fathers, Ibrahim, Ishaq, Yaqub, and we would never do shirk. And he's hoping when he says we would never do shirk, and that's a favor Allah has done to all people, I'm hoping they start thinking, wait, do we do shirk? Is that what you're trying to say? But he's not saying it directly, is he? But now, notice what happens. Ya sahibai sijn, my 2 companions, my 2 comrades in prison, my 2 prison inmates. Sahib actually means someone who spends a lot of time with somebody else. These guys just came to him And they just said that we just want to talk to you. And now he's befriending them first and says, look, you're like my sahib, you're my companions, both of you, and we're in prison together. أَأَرْبَابٌ مُتَفَرِّقُونَ خَيْرٌ. Are many Rabb, many lords, many masters, are many different kinds of masters better? Amillah or Allah? Before I go further, are different kinds of gods better or Allah? And he's not talking about other people now. Who's he talking to? Now he's getting direct. Now he's getting direct. But the words he used are really interesting. Arbab. Let's deal with the word arbab first. Arbab is the plural of the word Rabb. Rabb in this surah clearly has been used for Allah. Rabb in this surah has clearly been used for slave owners also. Kings also. Kings can also be a Rabb. They can be a Rabb. Actually later on, they're going to go talk to their Rabb about Yusuf alayhi salam. Okay, so the word Rabb can be used in that way, and it's used in Arabic that way too. Rabbul Bayt, for example. Okay. So, and mutafarriquna is the human plural. And the human plural can mean, are multiple slave masters better or Allah? Now that's an interesting comparison, because you could have even Yusuf alayhi salam had a master earlier on, the Aziz, right? But he had the Aziz and he also had Allah. But now he's saying, are different arbab better or is Allah better? He understands, Yusuf is clarifying something. You can have a human master above you that has authority over you, power above you, the power to kill you, the power to pay you, the power to feed you. But understand that above him is someone even higher. Even that Rabb has a Rabb. And that's Allah. Yeah? He's also saying that the words he didn't say is many gods. One mutafarriqun, Alusi says one way you can understand multiple gods is, more than one master. More than one master. But it can also mean more than one God. But let's think about more than one human master. And in modern language, we wouldn't even say master, we'd say more than one boss. Yeah? If you have more than one boss, how's your life? How's life go when you have more than one authority over you? Hey, I need you to do this in 5 minutes. Another one comes, I need you to do this in 3 minutes. No, what are you doing? Do this. No, what are you doing? Do that. You're going to lose your mind and eventually say, I can't deal with this. I need a single chain of command. I can't be getting instructions from multiple bosses. Now, what happens sometimes when children have different instructions coming, one from the father, one from the mother, the children will either lose their mind or make their parents lose their mind because they'll use the parents against each other. Well, mom said don't do this. Dad said do that. Why don't you talk to dad about it? And now the mom and dad are going at it while you go free. The point is, if you have multiple bosses, each of them is exerting their authority on you, yes? But that means not any one of them has full authority on you. Because if one of them tries to exert full authority on you, you can say, actually, I can't do that because I have the other boss telling me to do something else. The other master is telling me to do something else, so I can only give you 50% because I got to go give the other one 50%. And now if you have 3 bosses, 4 bosses, 5 bosses, you got to divide it up, right? So no one of them has full authority over you. But also, no one of them is ever pleased with you. Because no one of them gets your 100%, right? So every one of them is like, you don't do anything. It's ridiculous. Because when you're doing something for someone else, you're not doing something for them. So they're constantly displeased with you. So, and these prisoners know that, because they know, for example, this is it happens in corporate structures, it happened in ancient society, it happens everywhere. There's you have a teacher, and above the teacher you have the headmaster, right, or the department head. So the English teacher, then you've got the head of the English department, and above the head of the English department you've got the dean of the school, and above the dean you got the principal, right? But the teacher has 3 bosses. 3 layers of bosses. He's got the head of the department, he's got the dean, and he's got the principal. So one day the principal tells him to do something, and he does it, but his department head said, I told you to do something else. No, but I got that from the principal. Why are you talking directly to the principal? You have to go through me. Right? Chain of command, right? He's like, what do you want me to do? He came to me and talked to me. I don't know what else to do. And now there's conflict, and someone's unhappy. And if you don't do what the principal said, why didn't you do it? My department heads told me to do something else. Well, I'm the principal. I'm his boss. I'm her boss. And you get stuck in the middle of that confusion. So you're constantly in trouble with somebody. That's one way of looking at it. So he says, Do you really want to live a life where you answer to so many multiple masters? But the thing is, for many of these people, they only had one master. One household was their master. So how would this apply to them? This is actually Allah not just talking about, through the tongue of Yusuf alayhi salam, not just talking about multiple bosses or multiple slave masters. He's talking about multiple forces that have influence on us. Do you really want, culture has its own influence on us. Family has its own influence on us. Our own greed has its own influence on us. Our personal needs have our own influence on us. We have lots of influences on us, each of them acting like they are the most important. And you submit to the call of one and you compromise the others. They're all upset. And you submit to the call of the others are upset. Imagine somebody who's really wants to make their boss happy, yeah? So they just overtime every day. When a guy is at overtime every day, who's unhappy with him? His family. Yeah, no, my family's boss. I need to take care of my family. Now he's showing up to work late every day. He's leaving early every day because he wants to prioritize his family. Now who's unhappy? The boss is unhappy. Right? So you cannot please all of them. And every time you try to please one of them or surrender yourself to one of them, you end up compromising other important parts of yourself. You end up losing balance. There is no balance because you're constantly letting something take full authority. And he says, I can free you from these multiple chains and you don't know how to balance them if you just understand that above all of these arbab, there's only one, and that is Allah. And once you understand that Allah is the ultimate authority, then all of these you will be able to balance. And if none of them are happy with you, you're still okay because Allah is happy with you. And there's a famous saying in Arabic, رِضَى النَّاسِ غَايَةٌ لَا تُدْرَكْ. Making people happy is a goal that can never be achieved. Pleasing somebody. At the end of the day, if someone says, are you pleased with me? Are you completely content with me? More or less. What's wrong? Well, let me give you a list. I've written it out. It could be between spouses, parents, children, siblings. We're not capable of being entirely happy with someone because we're all flawed. That's life. We're all flawed. Allah Azza wa Jal can be entirely happy with us while we are completely flawed. You could have a lifetime of mistakes and make tawbah, and Allah is completely happy with you. That's humanly impossible. Not even for a father or a mother. Yaqub alayhi salam couldn't be completely okay with his sons. Even at the end of the story, he couldn't do it. When they said, can you make dua for us? Ask Allah to forgive. He said, I will, eventually. I can't get myself to do it right now. Too scarred. Too hurt. The thing with different gods is different powers that you're looking to please, not realizing not one of them will ever be what? Pleased with you. And the other meaning of Rabb is someone who nurtures you. But if the boss can only nurture you financially, and a family can nurture you maybe emotionally, right? Friends can maybe nurture you by easing your mind or something like that, giving you just some time to relax. Each one of those can only provide you a limited kind of nurturing. Where will you find complete nurturing? Only one Rabb. أَرْبَابٌ مُتَفَرِّقُونَ خَيْرٌ. Are different arbab, different gods, different masters, are they better or Allah? This ayah is often compared with another famous ayah in the Quran, which inshallah eventually I'll talk about in detail with you guys. Allah gives an analogy of two slaves, because slavery was a known phenomenon. And He says, imagine a slave who only has one master, and imagine another slave who is partnered, shared by many masters, who each conflict with each other. Now that second analysis, which is similar to this, different gods, yeah? Mutafarriqun also means they're all different from each other. Because it comes from the origin of farq, which actually fundamentally means difference, or separated. So each god that they believe in is a different shape, different size, yeah? Different priority. And that alone tells you that they have their own limits. The fact that they're different from each other itself is proof that they have limits. And if they have limits, how can they fulfill you ever? If you turn them into arbab. Then if you study other religions in which there are multiple gods, like for example, Greek mythology or Hindu mythology, things like that. In those religions you'll find the gods are always at war with each other. Whether it's Norse mythology or Greek mythology or anything else, this god of war is against the god of, light, or god of this or god of that, and they're all odds against or they're killing each other. That's what they're doing. And this idea, Arbab Mutafarriqun, is suggesting that you are in the middle. If you take any worldview other than believing in Allah alone, you are going to end up with, even if it's not mythology, even if it's different kinds of gods. There are other gods now. Most people that are modernized, most people that are now, university graduates or, exposed to modern media, the social media and the internet and the information age like never before, they're exposed to ideas they never thought possible, right? And in this time, this day and age, you don't have to worship idols, you can worship isms. You can think of any ism as the absolute truth that must be followed. Somebody could become a hardline communist. They believe in communism or humanism or pluralism or feminism or you name the ism. And that ism is the ultimate truth. That ism is what humanity must strive for. That ism is what must be served. They are now gods. And they're all at odds with each other. All of those isms are fighting with each other. And he says, are different arbab that are at odds against each other better, or Allah? But he didn't just say Allah, because they don't know who Allah is, right? But the one thing they do know is, you're saying we should abandon many and follow only one. And the next name of Allah is Allah al-Wahid, or Allah al-Wahid, Allah the One. Allah the One. Now here's the problem with one. Some of the mushrikun, Shaykh Suhaib was telling me today, some of the mushrikun had come to the Prophet ﷺ and said, you only believe in one God? We've got many. Our many can take on that one. He could beat that one. Because in their mind, they're thinking of gods the way we think of people. You only got one backup? I got 20. My 20 can take on your one. You got no chance against my 20. So when the word one is almost synonymous with alone, and alone is associated with weak, vulnerable, exposed, no support, army of one. And they say, oh, you're gonna stand up to me? You and what army? Right? The point is, when you're alone, you're weak. You have no backup. So the idea of Allah being one can be seen as a problem for those who believe in multiple gods. Because I can go to this God for wealth, and that God for health, and this God for money, and this God for power, and that God for love. Or I can go to different gods for different things. You got just one God for everything? He must be exhausted. Right? He must be overwhelmed. He must be overwhelmed because he's got to take care of everything. At least we have different department gods. Right? So I can go to this God for this problem, that God for that problem. And that makes sense from their worldview, right? But notice what Allah says. And by the way, every time in the Quran, 6 times, Al-Wahid, which means what? One. Whenever that name occurs in the Quran, it occurs 6 times. It comes paired with another name of Allah every time. And that is to say, these two names can never be separated from each other. What is that other name? It's Al-Wahidu Al-Qahhar. Al-Qahhar. Al-Qahhar means the overwhelming one. Not the one who is overwhelmed because he is one, but he is the only one that overwhelms all. Isn't that incredible? And by the way, those gods that are all at odds with each other and they have different powers or different things you go to them for, different masters of different things, here's one ilah that overwhelms all of them in everything they can offer. And if all of them stood united to stand against him and to be at war with him, then he could overwhelm all of them because they are nothing but myth anyway. So it's such a powerful combination of names. The one, the overwhelming. Because in creation, when someone is just one, they are overwhelmed. It's the opposite. They're maqhur. They're easily overcome. When a species only has one left, they're going extinct. Right? They're on the verge of collapse. They're done for. You know the word qahara in Arabic actually comes from when you take meat and you roast it to the point that all of its juices have evaporated and it's completely well done meat. like it's been burnt to the almost crisp before you let it go, that's quhira al-lahm. That's quhira. And from it came the idea of someone who overpowers their enemy, where they drain all their energy out and they got nothing left. That when someone has the power to do that to their enemy, they're called qahir. The Pharaoh used that word for himself when he said about himself, "Inna fawqahum qahirun." We're going to be qahir over these Israelites. We're going to drain them of every bit of energy they have. We're going to overwhelm them completely, overpower them completely. You know? And so Allah uses that name for Al-Qahhar, the one who dominates over and over and over again, the one who overwhelms over and over and over again. And so on the one hand, you've got these multiple gods that are each of them getting overwhelmed by the other. They're even getting overwhelmed by the other. And here you have one that overshadows all, overwhelms all. Al-Wahid Al-Qahhar. It's this powerful name of Allah used in this ayah. And this is how He's introducing Allah to them. After talking about we should be grateful to Allah, that's the positive side, right? But you better not mess with Allah because He's Al-Wahid Al-Qahhar. Now it's kind of switching over to what? Warning. It's going from positive to negative reinforcement. You better believe in Allah. Now the question I had to myself, if other prophets took years to deliver this message, to give it little by little by little, and develop this notion, why is Yusuf ﷺ dropping all of it in one shot, in one conversation? Because they told him a dream. And in that dream, he knows that for one of them, he's going to be dead in a couple of days. The Bible says 3 days. We don't know exactly, but soon. It's happening. And the other one is going to get released, and he's going to go back to his old job with a king. Which means, basically, this is the last opportunity for either of them to receive any da'wah to Islam. He knows that, yes? Because he heard the dream. So it's basically, he sees these two men as a state of emergency. I will do everything I can to save these two young men. So I'm going to start soft as da'wah should start. But I'm going to let the sense of urgency that they need to accept this call and the seriousness of it be known to them, because they're out of time. They got no time left. And he's as concerned about the one that's about to die as the one that's about to live. Because if you're not getting the message of Islam, you're as good as dead anyway. That's the powerful thing about these two. You would think the one who's about to die should get a different message, and the one who's going to live should get a different message. Because he got time. What are the sense of urgency that Yusuf has, because he recognizes that even the second one, when he goes out there, he's not going to hear about Allah anymore. So I need to nail something in his head before he leaves here that he can chew on. Hopefully, maybe he'll take the benefit of this reminder. So he introduces Allah as the mighty, the powerful. By the way, these young men that are in prison, who do they think of as singular authority? The king, their master. And now they're being introduced. All those masters are nothing. There's only one, Allah, Al-Wahid Al-Qahhar. Then he says, now he's being so direct with them. First he said, is this one better or that better, guys? That's how he started, right? Are these better or Allah better? But now he's even more direct. He says, مَا تَعْبُدُونَ مِن دُونِهِ. You are not worshipping besides Allah anybody, illa asma'an, except names. Sammaytumuha, that you came up with yourselves. Remember what I told you about previous prophets? How they used to come after the false religions? He doesn't have time for them to argue about their religions and their mythologies. Before you tell me what you believe, let me just tell you what your beliefs are. Nothing but names that you made up yourselves. And before you can say, no, we didn't make them up ourselves. We learned that from our father who learned this from his. He says, Antum wa aba'ukum, the names you made up yourselves, y'all and your fathers. So before you even get to argue about why you believe what you believe, I know what you're going to say. I know the arguments that are made. My father Ibrahim was given these arguments by his father when he wanted to hold on to shirk. I learned these arguments already, so I know what you're going to say, and I'm going to preemptively strike and take that out of the equation and tell you and your fathers. It's all made up names. You know, it's interesting. Funny enough, this is a Sheikh Suhaib thing, but I thought it was epic and cute. The word asma is the plural of ism, yeah? And the new gods are all isms, like capitalism, communism, humanism, pluralism, atheism, all these asma that these isms literally, that you've just named, and you've taken them as absolute truths. You and your ancestors, antum wa aba'ukum. So he says, first of all, he takes away the legitimacy of your religions because they're ancient. The fact that they're ancient has nothing to do with them being legitimate. So don't even bring that argument to me. I'm looking out for you. What you have been worshipping are nothing but mythologies that you came up with yourselves. You and your ancestors. By the way, this is exactly the claim they want to make about Islam. In Western studies of Islam, in Orientalist studies, they want to look at Islam as an interesting phenomenon of mythologies that was developed by borrowing from different cultures and traditions. It's pretty interesting, fun lie against our religion. Asatirul awwalin, legends of ancient times, right? And here the Quran is saying, actually, we reject any claim of anybody who follows a religion that's based on just mythologies. If the Quran itself is mythologies and just stories, why would it stake its entire claim that such a thought process is false to begin with? It would be invalidating itself. إِلَّا أَسْمَاءٌ سَمَّيْتُمُوهَا أَنْتُمْ وَأَبَاؤُكُمْ. He says, مَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ بِهَا مِنْ سُلْطَانٍ. Okay, before you come up with any other kind of proof. But the king believes it. But the smartest people we know believe it. What about all these books? What about all those people? The majority doing something must be the validation that it's right. The smartest people we know believing something must mean that they're right. They're not stupid. So they must believe it for some reason. Before they can even say that, he preempts it by saying, Allah has not sent down any kind of authority to justify that whatsoever. No proof, no validation, no authorization has come from Allah to legitimize any part of the religion that you believe in. None of it has any legitimacy because it didn't come from Allah. That's my point. You need to understand that our religion can only be followed if it comes from the ultimate, singular, dominant, overwhelming authority, Allah. And He didn't authorize any of these names. He didn't send down any validation, any proof. Sultan can mean proof. Sultan can mean authorization or authority. He didn't send out any authority to these names. He didn't reveal any validation to these names. He didn't reveal any proof or establishment of these names. This does not exist. I'm refuting all of it. This is the La ilaha before you get to the illallah. That's what this is. Ma anzalallahu biha min sultan. Now he gets to this remarkable phrase, Inil hukmu illa lillah. Governance, kingdom, wisdom, power, judgment belongs to no one except Allah. What's this? By the way, all of this is one ayah. Yeah? All of this, what we've read so far, is one ayah. My two fellow prisoners are multiple arbab better than Allah, the dominant. That's one ayah. Then the next one. You worship, the ones you worship other than Him are nothing except names that you've made up. You and your ancestors. Allah has not sent down any authority to validate them whatsoever. The governance belongs to none but Allah at all. Still one statement. Rule belongs to none but Allah. What is this? This ayah is not about government. This part of the ayah is about the what you can use to legitimately say that this is true religion. The only one who has the right to speak on behalf of the religion of Allah is Allah. Allah speaks for Himself. No one has that power. Unless Allah gives that authority to a prophet to speak on his behalf. Then he can speak on his behalf. But no one gets to say what the religion is and what it isn't, because that power and that governance and that rule, that verdict belongs to none other than Allah. Now people use this ayah to say this is an ayah that proves that government should only belong to Allah, meaning all governments should be Islamic, right? Which is Islam's relationship with politics. As big as that subject is, and it will be dealt with inshallah when one day we deal with Surah Yusuf, Surah At-Tawbah, Surah As-Saf. There are other surahs where Islam and governance are talked about in detail. But people use this ayah. See, Allah says governance or rule belongs to none other than Allah. It's in the Quran. But then you ask a follow-up question. Where is it in the Quran? It's in An'am and it's in Surah Yusuf. Oh, Surah Yusuf. Who said it? Who's saying it? Yusuf alayhi salam saying it? Okay. Where is he saying it? In prison. When he comes out of prison, where is he going to go? He's going to go work under the king? And he's going to be a minister? Is the king a Muslim? Is the king a believer? No. Is the government believers? No. As a matter of fact, later on in the Quran, we learn that he died making da'wah to them. He kept warning them, and he died making da'wah to them. حَتَّى إِذَا هَلَكَ قُلْتُمْ لَنْ يَبْعَثَ اللَّهُ مِنْ بَعْدِهِ رَسُولًا. Until the time he died, and you people said, Allah will not send a messenger after him. Because you didn't accept his call. If he believes government should only belong to Muslims, Yusuf alayhi salam, how can he say that and work in a government of non-Muslims? Wait, he's the one who said it, right? It's this surah. It's not some other surah. Then people say, well, no. Yusuf alayhi salam worked under a non-Muslim government, but that's not our sharia, that's the sharia of Yusuf alayhi salam. It's haram for any Muslim to work under a Muslim government, etc., etc. Okay, so this part of his statement is our sharia, but that part of his career is not our sharia. So we'll take this, that's mansukh. The point, I'm not trying to legitimize working for a non-Muslim government, but I want you to understand something. When you want to draw evidence to make a claim, you better be clear cut. You want to make evidences about the Islam's relationship with politics, there are plenty of evidences you can use. Use them. But don't try to substantiate a claim based on something the Quran is not saying. Don't have the conclusion first, and then the supporting evidence is being made to submit to your conclusion. No, the Quran is not evidence. The Quran is the final word, and your conclusions should submit to the word of Allah. The word of Allah should not submit to your conclusions. That equation can't be flipped. Now, are there other places you can use? Perhaps. We can discuss those. This isn't one of them. This is not one of them. What's he talking about? He's talking about the legitimacy, the right of Allah to govern and dictate what the religion of Allah is. Well, who has authority to speak about the unseen? When you come up with these multiple gods and multiple, deities and mythological creatures and all of it from the unseen world, from that realm, you don't have any right to speak about that, because that right and that governance and that authority only belongs to Allah. So notice this statement, in al-hukmu illa lillah. I'll go further and then explain. Amara alla ta'budu illa iyyah. He commanded that you should worship nobody except him. That's the next word. He commanded that you all should worship nobody except him. So now look, he started the ayah by saying you're not worshipping anyone other than names. And now he's getting to the point. He's saying Allah has commanded you to worship him. Allah's commandments are one of the last things the prophets talk about. First thing you talk about is believing in Allah. Once the believing in Allah is established, then we deal with Allah's commandments. Yeah? But there's an express da'wah here. It's crunched together. We get to the amr of Allah to worship him. The command of Allah, he's telling you, Allah has dictated that you worship nobody except him. And by the way, ta'buduna, the plural is not ta'buda. Both of you worship. He's using the plural, meaning you and everybody. You and everybody. He's opening it up. I'm starting with you two, but not limited to you two. He keeps throwing that in. So now he says he's commanded that you worship no one except him. Now go back. Appreciate something. Hukum, the power to govern, the power to rule, belongs with no one other than Allah. The statement right before it is about his authority, and the statement right after it is about his authority, and that one's in the middle. How so? He says, in al-hukmu illa lillah. Right before it he says, Allah didn't send any authority for those names, so they can't be valid. And right after that he said he commanded that you should worship none except him. Authority, and that's proof of what hukum is referring to here. The hukum of Allah, the rule of Allah, the final judgment of Allah is actually being explained inside of the ayah itself. ذَلِكَ الدِّينُ الْقَيِّمُ. That is the upright, always standing religion. I love this word, qayyim. Qayyim gives us many meanings. Qayyim, one of its meanings is, qima, which is a value. Like for example, truth, justice, honesty, these are values, right? The book that is full of all the right values, and those values and it comes from the word qama, which means to stand. The values that always stand, doesn't matter what society you're in, what century you're in, what culture you're in, what language you're in, they're always the same. They don't change, they don't budge from their place. That's actually qayyim. This is the religion that is ذَلِكَ الدِّينُ الْقَيِّمُ. That is the deen that will always stand upright, meaning the worship of Allah and Allah alone. And as a result of that worship, what values come? What is one value we already learned? We don't go near zina. Practically, he already demonstrated that value, right? And that was part of him worshipping Allah. That means that that value is always going to stand. It's never going to be a culture or a society or a century or a community where that's outdated. It was always there, it will always be there, it's always standing pillar. Now this is an important point of reflection before I let you guys go. This is where we have to really focus. When he says this is the upright religion, you know what he's saying? This was true when your fathers were around. This is true when your grandfathers were around. This is true when you're around now. This will be true after you're gone. And the only way you can ever stand upright is if you hold on to this. I often give the analogy to understand the word qayyim, because by the way, qayyim is a hal and a description really, a living description of the Quran in Surah Al-Kahf. وَلَمْ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ عِوَجًا قَيِّمًا. قَيِّمًا. Now what does that mean? Let me give you by analogy. Imagine there's a river, a very strong river flowing. Anything you throw in that river, what's going to happen to it? It's going to flow. And in the middle of that river, there's a giant tree. And that tree is standing tall. And rocks are passing by. Boats are passing by. If somebody accidentally falls into that river, they're passing by. Logs of wood are passing by. But this tree for centuries is standing in place. Deeply rooted. Doesn't matter how strong the waves are, it stands its ground. Yes? Take another analogy. There's a tree like that in the middle of a field. The wind sometimes blows this way, sometimes blows that way. Rocks, dust, anything goes this way, that way, the other way. One thing that doesn't move from its place is what? The tree asluha thabitun, its roots are deep, far'uha fis sama, its branches go into the sky. Now, if you are caught in that river and you don't want to drown, what's your only hope? You better hold on to this tree. You better not let go. You let go, you're going to get flown down the river. By the way, as you flow down the river, with every passing moment, are you in a new place? Isn't that the case? But if you're holding on to that tree, doesn't matter who passes by, you're still in the same place. The people who follow the religion of Ibrahim alayhi salam, whether they live in 2020 or the year 20 or 4,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago, they're still exactly in the same place. And the people who don't hold on to this deen, you know what happens to them? 20 years ago, something was completely politically incorrect. It was wrong. It was unacceptable 30, 40 years ago. Then 10 years ago, it was not so bad. Then 20 years ago, it became kind of okay. Then 10 years ago, it became the new right thing to do. Now, it's you better accept it as glorious. You better accept it as the right thing. And we have a right to do this wrong thing. Morality, you're in a new place. Every decade, you're in a new place. The world around you changes. Morality changes. Right and wrong changes. What's acceptable and unacceptable changes. Yes or no? Completely. I think of it, I won't even go to the more graphic examples. Everybody can understand what I'm talking about. But 30 years ago, the average Muslim family, 30, 40 years ago, no, not even 30, let's go 20 years ago. Would you ever imagine going to a Muslim family in, let's say, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, Kuwait, wherever, some Muslim country in the Arab world, Africa, anywhere, right? And when you walk into a Muslim family's house, their daughter's pictures are all over the wall as she poses in full color. They're all over the wall when you walk in. Would you ever imagine that? That's unthinkable. Not from a Muslim family. That's just unimaginable. Is that a normal thing now that people have, our families are exposed and their beauty is exposed and entire photo gallery? It's completely normal now. A value that if somebody found out 30 years ago, 20 years ago, would have lost their mind. They would have lost their mind. They would have thought 1,000 times before they considered it. Now is actually completely normal. Completely normal. Normal changes. And with it, values change. Like Quran will say, lower your eyes. Yeah? But what lower your eyes means is, might change for one generation to another to another. Our standards might drop. Now my standards might drop, your standards might drop because we're weak. But if we go back and holding on to the book, they won't drop. Then we'll realize how far, maybe we had to flow down the river a little bit, we got a little far from the tree, we got to swim back upstream and catch it again. Because we're getting away from it. It's not getting away from us, it's in its place. We're the ones getting away. We're the ones flowing away. And if you go back, you'll find yourself in the same exact place that somebody was 300 years ago, 500 years ago, 5,000 years ago, and 500 years from now in the future. They'll be in the same exact place because this is the deen that is qayyim, stands in place. It doesn't modernize, it doesn't adapt to new values. Now, can its laws be applicable in new ways? Yes, its laws can, but its values can't. Its values can't. The worship of Allah will never change. What is haram will always be haram. What is evil will always be evil. What is good will always be good. What is unacceptable will always be unacceptable. What hurts your faith will always hurt your faith. Never will a time come when something Allah describes that hurts your faith, that stains your heart, will become something that helps your heart. That will never happen. Nothing that Allah describes as an ugly deed will become beautiful, except when shaitan makes it beautiful. But it will never actually become beautiful. These values will never change. ذَلِكَ الدِّينُ الْقَيِّمُ. Yusuf ﷺ is in different environments. He was in the environment living under a prophet as his father. Then he was being sold as a slave, a completely different worldview. People are using filthy language, they're cussing each other out, maybe there's zina all around, women are being sold too, can you imagine? He must have seen all kinds of crazy things. When somebody says, man, I come from the streets, you ain't come from that kind of streets, the kind Yusuf ﷺ came from. He's seen the prison life, he's seen the slave life, he's seen the servant life, he's seen the dirty politician life, he's seen the world as dirty as it gets. And when people are in the dirty world, their values change. They're like, I gotta adapt, I gotta survive, I gotta get with everybody else. I have to mold myself. He wouldn't mold himself. He says, guys, you're gonna leave these places that he's been in, think of them like he just went into one room and then walked into another room and walked into another room and none of them are his home. And the longest room he's going to stay in is actually the grave. So, and the one that's going to get us prepared for that one, it doesn't matter what room you're in, don't change your clothes. Don't change who you are, just stay the same. Just be ready for that, wear the outfit that gets you ready for that one. That's it. That's the message that he's giving them. Guys, you're going to go through some serious changes. But if you hold on to this, just hold on to this. You know? What a profound message to give these two young men. ذَلِكَ الدِّينُ الْقَيِّمُ. And especially to give it to young men. Especially to give it to young men. Why? Because when you're young, every which way that you want to go is available to you. It's right in front of you. When you're a young man or a woman, every option is in front of you. You want to drink? Nobody will find out. You want to do drugs? Nobody will find out. You want to go to a club? You can get away with it. You want to do something behind your parents knowing or behind anybody finding out? You can do it easy. Nowadays it's just tap, tap, tap. You can get away with anything. You can live whatever kind of life you want. It's all available to you. And every one of those lifestyles is calling a different God calling you for their worship. It's a different God, every one of them. And you might decide that your God became money, or your God became desire, or your God became looks, or your God became whatever. You can decide, pick a God. أَرْبَابٌ مُتَفَرِّقُونَ. And some young man and some young woman will decide, I'm going to hold on to ad-deenul qayyim, I'm going to hold on to Allah, the alone that overwhelms all of these desires of mine. All of these gods are crushed by that one Allah. I'm going to stand by Him. And that makes you different from everybody, man. You could be on the same college campus, you could be in the same office, you could be in the same environment as everybody else who's flowing away with the river, with the way they talk, with the way they look at each other, with the way they act, with the priorities they have in life, the things that interest them, and you're standing there like a pillar, not budging like everybody else, and you stick out like a sore thumb. And people just look at you like, you're not like everybody else, you're weird. You didn't even preach or nothing. You're just standing in place. That's all you're doing. Because you're following ad-deen al-qayyim. This is Yusuf alayhi salam even in silence impressing his master. This is Yusuf alayhi salam without even preaching, and this wife is obsessed with him. Because he's different. He's not like others. Why isn't he flowing? Why isn't he, flowing down the river like everybody else? Why don't I ever catch him staring at me? How come I never catch him like that? What is it about him? Everywhere he goes, it's the same thing. So he says, ذَلِكَ الدِّينُ الْقَيِّمُ وَلَكِنَّ أَكْثَرَ النَّاسِ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. He says, but most people have no knowledge. Most people don't know. What's he telling these two young guys? Now you guys are not the most people because now you know. Now you know. Most people don't know, but you do now. I know. And now that I told you, you also know. He hasn't yet told them anything about their dreams, yes? But he dropped some pretty heavy stuff on them. Some life-altering stuff. Here they were thinking, man, I can't stop thinking about this dream. I don't know what it means. I'm stressed out about it. Could you tell us what it means? Yeah, because you're worried about your life, right? I am too. I'm worried about your life too. So he just, now, let's put a timer on it, okay? Let me start my timer. I don't know how to do this timer thing. God, this is hard. This is why you don't, okay. Anyway. Oh, there's a timer right there. Okay. I'm going to recite these ayat. قال لا يأتيكما طعام ترزقانه إلا نبأتكما بتأويله قبل أن يأتيكما ذلكما مما علمني ربي إني تركت ملة قوم لا يؤمنون بالله وهم بالآخرة هم كافرون واتبعت ملة آبائي إبراهيم وإسحاق ويعقوب ما كان لنا أن نشرك بالله من شيء ذلك من فضل الله علينا وعلى الناس ولكن أكثر الناس لا يشكرون يا صاحبي السجن أأرباب متفرقون خير أم الله الواحد القهار ما تعبدون من دونه إلا أسماء سميتموها أنتم وآباؤكم ما أنزل الله بها من سلطان إن الحكم إلا لله أمر ألا تعبدوا إلا إياه ذلك الدين القيم ولكن أكثر الناس لا يعلمون. It's 50 seconds. His entire message, under a minute. It's done. That's all he had to say. Now he's going to tell, and then what I discuss with you tomorrow, he's going to tell them what the dream and what it meant. But in that 1 minute, can someone's worldview entirely change? Can someone, what they think about, what their life means, what they're worried about, what their fears are? Can they not be overwhelmed by any other Rabb anymore? They can only be overwhelmed by one, Al-Wahid Al-Qahhar. Subhanallah. And that before he scared them of Allah, he told them of the favor of Allah on them. Most people aren't grateful. And most people don't even know. Most people don't know the seriousness of this. And most people aren't grateful for what Allah is doing for them. But you have a chance, guys. You have a chance. But anyway, about your dream. And that's what he's going to come to in the next ayah. Barakallahu li wa lakum fil Qur'an al-Hakim. ونفعني وإياكم بالآيات والذكر الحكيم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. Somebody hit the button.